Welcome to this explainer. Okay, I am so excited to get into this one with you today because we are unpacking a legitimate, real-world macroeconomic mystery. If you're the kind of person who loves seeing how the hidden gears of finance turn to literally save entire economies from the brink, well, you are in exactly the right place. We're looking at a brilliant strategy deployed to rescue a plunging currency. A strategy that, funny enough, is suddenly incredibly relevant again right now. But honestly, the best part of this whole story isn't even the math, though the math is super fascinating. It's the fact that the guy who eventually championed this idea absolutely hated it at first. Okay, let's dive into this. Completely idiotic. I mean, wow, right? That wasn't just some critic speaking with the benefit of hindsight. That was the initial gut reaction of the brilliant economist and former Reserve Bank of India governor Raghuram Rajan when central bank officials first pitched him this special currency swap window to prop up the falling Indian rupee. He just thought it was a terrible idea. He was firmly in the no way camp, totally convinced the central bank was just going to end up footing a massive multi-billion-dollar bill. And yet, it would go on to become arguably one of his most celebrated and successful policies ever. So to understand why we're talking about this right now, we really just need to look at what the rupee is going through today. It is once again facing severe external pressure. It's depreciating. And in response, the government and the RBI are blowing the dust off their old playbook to ease the pressure on the balance of payments. They're actually bringing back a version of that exact same controversial policy from 2013, the FCNR swap window. So the big billion-dollar question we're answering today is, what exactly is this financial magic trick? And more importantly, can it actually work a second time? First things first, let's just quickly demystify a bit of financial jargon. Please do not let the alphabet soup intimidate you. FCNRB simply stands for Foreign Currency Non-Resident Bank Deposits. Basically, these are term deposits that non-resident Indians, or NRIs, can open with Indian commercial banks. But the absolute genius of it for the depositor is that the money is kept in foreign currency. So you deposit US dollars, it stays tracked in US dollars. You are completely firewalled against any depreciation of the rupee. Oh, and the interest you earn, it's totally tax-free in India. So yeah, you can definitely see why NRIs absolutely love these accounts. Now, what's really interesting about this is how the underlying mechanics work behind the scenes. Because you see, that ironclad protection for the depositor, it creates a massive headache for the Indian banks. The banks take those foreign dollars, convert them to rupees to lend out domestically, but then eventually they have to convert them back to dollars to pay the depositor. If the rupee falls during that time, the bank loses an absolute fortune. So, to protect themselves, banks usually buy insurance in the forward exchange market. This is known as a hedging cost. And that cost can be steep, like 3.5 to 3.75%. That pretty much vaporizes their profit margin. But in the specific swap window arrangement, the Reserve Bank of India steps in and basically says, hey, don't worry, we're going to bear that massive hedging cost for you. By absorbing that risk, the RBI allows the banks to offer highly attractive interest rates to pull those much needed dollars into the country. To really appreciate the sheer power of the RBI taking on that hefty cost, we have to look back at the 2013 miracle. Between May and August of 2013, global markets basically went into full panic mode. The US Federal Reserve announced they were going to reduce quantitative easing, a moment famously dubbed the taper tantrum. And man, it was devastating for India. The rupee crashed by a terrifying 29% in just 4 short months. India was staring right down the barrel of a full-blown currency crisis. So in September 2013, the RBI flipped the switch and opened up this swap window. By the time it closed in November, it had pulled in a staggering $34 billion. It literally stopped the crisis dead in its tracks and fully stabilized the rupee. But behind closed doors, there was some fierce internal drama going on. The detractors, which, remember, included Raghuram Rajan at first, viewed the whole thing as nothing more than, quote, a gimmick. And to be fair, they correctly calculated that the subsidy, where the RBI pays that 3.5% hedging cost, would ultimately stick the central bank with a $3 billion bill. It was a massive gamble. The former RBI governor, Devori Subrao, the deputy governors, and the finance ministry were all just desperately trying to convince Rajan, who was an officer on special duty at the time, to give it the green light. And thank goodness they finally talked him into it. The final result? A mind-boggling $1.6 trillion. Rajan actually admitted later on that, yeah, the central bank did indeed end up paying that $3 billion bill, but the policy stabilized the currency so incredibly well that it saved India up to $1.6 trillion on its import bill. I mean, talk about a return on investment. What started out as an idiotic idea turned into an absolute masterstroke of macroeconomic stabilization. let's move to the mechanics and see how this builds. Because how exactly did this turn into such an unbelievable opportunity for the individual investor? How in the world did the RBI raise $34 billion that fast? I'll tell you right now, it wasn't just patriotism from non-resident Indians. It was an absolutely irresistible financial loophole known as arbitrage. If you're not familiar, arbitrage is basically just a fancy word for finding a way to make a risk-free profit from price differences in different markets. Let's walk through this step by step, treating it almost like a brilliant financial life hack. Imagine you're an NRI back in 2013. Step 1, you start out with $100,000 of your own cash. Step 2, because global interest rates were hovering near zero at the time, you stroll into a bank in Singapore and you borrow $900,000 at a tiny 2% interest rate. Boom, now you've got $1 million. Step 3, you take that entire $1 million and deposit it in an Indian bank in Mumbai that's offering 3% on FCNR deposits using your original $100K as collateral. Step 4, the math kicks in. You're earning $30,000 a year from the Indian bank, but you only have to pay $18,000 a year in interest back to the Singapore bank. So the crucial point is, look at what you actually walk away with here. You just pocketed a cool net profit of $12,000 every single year. But remember, you only ever put in $100,000 of your own actual cash. Earning $12K on a $100K investment, that means you just locked in a staggering 12% yield on your money entirely risk-free. And that right there is exactly why the money came absolutely flooding into India in 2013. It was essentially a perfectly designed, risk-free money printing machine for depositors, entirely subsidized by the RBI taking on that nasty currency risk. Which brings us sharply right back to the present day, because the rupee is under serious external pressure once again. The RBI is stepping in, again, offering a swap window and waiving those heavy hedging costs for banks so they can attract those precious dollars. But the golden question remains, will this magical arbitrage trick actually work today to save the currency? Like, can we just hit copy and paste on the 2013 solution? And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why the 2013 playbook is running into a massive brick wall today. If you compare the yields from 2013 to today, it paints a pretty stark picture. Back then, borrowing money globally was practically free because US Treasury yields were sitting near 0%. That's the whole reason borrowing to invest in India was so ridiculously profitable. But look at today's rates. US yields are currently sitting way up around 4.2%. Meanwhile, a major Indian bank like SBI is offering an FCNR rate of just about 3.6%. So the cold, hard reality of the present is this. If you are an NRI right now, you can just walk into your local US bank and get 4.2 to 4.35% on your dollar deposits without lifting a finger or wiring money halfway across the globe. So why on earth would you go through the hassle of sending your money to an Indian bank that's only offering 3.6%? You wouldn't. The easy slam dunk arbitrage math from 2013 is completely broken. For this swap window to actually work today, Indian banks can't just sit back and relax. Since the RBI is subsidizing their hedging costs, the banks have to actively take those massive savings and pass them directly on to the depositors. They literally have to raise their FCNR rates significantly to beat what US banks are already offering, because otherwise, those dollars simply aren't going to come. Which leaves us looking at a truly fascinating situation. That idiotic 2013 idea, it was an absolute stroke of genius, but it was perfectly tailored for a low interest rate world. Today, the global economy has shifted entirely beneath our feet. We're using the same tools, but the playing field is radically different. So will the banks step up, share that RBI's subsidy with depositors, and recreate that massive inflow of dollars? Or will the RBI eventually need to dig way deeper into its playbook and invent a brand new magic trick to save the rupee this time around? Well, that is the exact space we all need to be watching incredibly closely. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep a close eye on those interest rates, and I will see you next time.